morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde.
For a year since the first major flight we organized to bring Canadians home from overseas. When we were coordinating emergency repatriations last winter, our priority was doing whatever it took to keep people safe. And from that moment right through to today, that continues to be what we're focused on. From border measures to vaccines to rapid testing to the wage subsidy, we're using every tool in the toolbox to get us all through this crisis. Let me start with some news on border measures. As of February 15th, when you return to Canada through a land border, you'll need to show a 72-hour PCR test, just like for air travel. Dès lundi prochain, le 15 février, lorsque vous revenez au Canada par les frontières terrestres, vous devrez fournir un résultat de test négatif remontant à un maximum de 72 heures, comme pour le retour par avion pour les voyageurs non essentiels. Today, I also have some news to share on vaccines. This week, tens of thousands of Pfizer vaccine doses will be delivered to Canada. This is good news for so many people who will be getting their dose. We know we all want to feel that relief of getting vaccinated, of watching our loved ones get vaccinated. We're all eager to know when it's going to be our turn. Well, I can tell you we are still very much on track for tens of millions of doses into the spring, and for everyone who wants to be vaccinated by September. Moving forward in the coming weeks and months, we're going to get even more doses, even faster, so we can all move through this together. Next week marks the start of a major ramp-up in vaccine shipments. Starting on the 15th, we're expecting hundreds of thousands more doses each week, and that's just from Pfizer. There are also other vaccine candidates currently in the approval process, and the top experts at Health Canada are working around the clock to ensure that any of these new vaccines approved is both safe and effective. On a déjà administré plus d'1 million de doses de vaccins contre la COVID-19 au Canada. Ces doses vitales ont été administrées à vos parents dans un établissement de soins de longue durée, à votre amie qui est infirmière ou à votre voisin qui est préposé au service de soutien à la personne. Et c'est seulement un début. On va poursuivre ces efforts jusqu'à ce que tous les Canadiens qui le souhaitent puissent se faire vacciner. Cette semaine, ce sont des dizaines de milliers de doses supplémentaires de Pfizer qui arrivent et plusieurs autres millions s'en viennent. En ce qui concerne les vaccins, les choses se déroulent comme prévu, malgré des délais temporaires. On va recevoir 20 millions de doses de Pfizer et de Moderna au cours du printemps. D'autres candidats vaccins sont en cours d'approbation. Les experts de Santé Canada travaillent très fort et vous pouvez être certain que tout vaccin approuvé sera sûr et sécuritaire. Je le confirme, vous et votre famille pourrez vous faire vacciner d'ici septembre. Mais même si tout se déroule comme prévu quant aux vaccins qui seront livrés aux Canadiens, on n'est pas encore sorti du bois. En gardant vos distances, en vous lavant les mains et en portant le masque, vous continuez à contribuer aux efforts contre la COVID-19. Il ne faut surtout pas lâcher. This morning, I also want to talk about where we are with testing. Rapid testing is key to keeping this virus under control, especially in schools, long-term care homes, and workplaces. Last Friday, this is something I spoke about with Dr. Janine McCready in Toronto. She and her team have spearheaded an innovative testing program at several schools, getting tests directly to communities that need it. In some neighborhoods, she told me that as many as 1 in 5 tests, that's 20%, come back positive. Clearly, there's real need for this testing. Her work shows that when people can get screened for COVID-19 and then get their results quickly, we can stop the spread. And this is true right across the country. Here in Ottawa, a recent program to test asymptomatic students and their families found several positive cases. Since they weren't showing any symptoms, without testing, these kids would have been in a busy classroom. But because of ramped-up testing, their families knew to isolate at home instead. Testing widely and often reduces transmission. That keeps cases down and it keeps people safe. Our government has sent 19.6 million rapid tests to the provinces and territories, with more on the way. We all want to see cases go down. We know that these tests can make a difference. Tests must be deployed. They can't be allowed to expire. And testing, like more contact tracing and vaccines, are going to be an essential part of the months forward as we get past this virus and this pandemic as quickly as possible. We all need to keep working together on all these different aspects to make sure we get through the summer in right form. En plus de parler de la nécessité d'utiliser les tests de dépistage lors de nos rencontres régulières avec les premiers ministres, on travaille maintenant avec le secteur privé pour déployer ces tests rapides dans les milieux de travail à l'échelle du pays. Le dépistage est efficace et on veut s'assurer que les tests de dépistage soient utilisés. Ces outils essentiels nous aideront à traverser les mois d'hiver et à amorcer la période de vaccination en masse au printemps dans le meilleur état possible. As Canadians, we all look forward to spring, this year more than ever. But I know we can all agree that there's one part of the season nobody likes: tax filing. Even so, it's important to file your taxes so you get things like the Canada Child Benefit, the Work from Home deduction, and the Climate Action Incentive. These benefits and credits can really help, especially after such a tough year. So that's what you should be able to focus on. Right now, I don't want you to have to worry about what you may owe in taxes. That's why we're providing 1 year without interest on certain 2020 tax debt, giving people more flexibility to repay amounts owing from last year. If you received federal emergency benefits, like the CERB, and you made up to $75,000 in taxable income, you will not have to pay interest on 2020 tax debt until April of next year. Our priority is ensuring that you and your family get through this pandemic and back on your feet. Cette dernière année a été assez difficile pour ceux qui ont perdu leur emploi ou ceux dont les heures ont été réduites. Que vous puissiez vous remettre sur pied sans que vous voyiez à vous soucier de l'impôt à payer. L'année dernière, plus de 8 millions de gens ont eu recours à la PCU pour payer leur loyer et mettre de la nourriture sur leur table. Je sais que certaines personnes ont souligné des renseignements imprécis concernant les exigences en matière de revenus nets et de revenus bruts pour qualifier pour la PCU. On veut clarifier la question. Les gens qui ont présenté une demande en fonction de leur revenu brut plutôt que de leur revenu net n'auront pas à retourner les paiements qui leur ont été versés tant que leur demande respecte également les autres critères d'admissibilité. For people who accessed CERB based on their gross income instead of their net income, as long as you meet the other eligibility criteria, you will not have to return those CERB payments. When we rolled out CERB last March, it was because people needed help in the face of a global, once-in-a-generation crisis. Well, the pandemic isn't yet over, so neither is our support. If you need help while you look for work, the Canada Recovery Benefit and Enhanced EI are there for you. If you need to take time off to care for your family, look to the Canada Recovery Caregiver Benefit. If you need to stay home from work because you're sick, the Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit is there to help. And if you need support on payroll for your employees or costs for your businesses, the wage subsidy and business loans are made for you. It's not easy to run a business from home or adapt to new public health rules. Yesterday, I spoke with Karen and Fahie. They're two young black entrepreneurs who have big plans. Karen showed me her photography studio and talked about the great work she's doing supporting black-owned businesses and products and her excitement about moving forward to a bricks-and-mortar storefront as we move through this pandemic. But right now, she's all online. And Faye talked to me about the costs of shipping coffee across the country and his excitement about building his business and also moving towards opening a coffee shop once we get through this pandemic as well. They all have big plans. And for all the young entrepreneurs across the country, all the entrepreneurs who are looking to go digital, to change their way of doing things, to grow through this pandemic and beyond, know that we are there to help you get through the hurdles and barriers in your way and create success, not just for you, but for employees, for community, and for our whole economy. We're here to support Canadian business owners, from training on e-commerce to targeted initiatives like the Black Entrepreneurship Program and the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy. Because no matter who you are, an entrepreneur, a worker, a parent, we've got your back. Cette pandémie n'est pas facile pour personne. En plus, l'hiver peut rendre tout ça encore plus difficile. Pendant le mois de février, parfois, on a l'impression que le printemps n'arrivera jamais. C'est normal si on ne se sent pas au sommet de notre forme. N'oubliez pas qu'il existe des ressources pour vous aider. Et d'ailleurs, ce jeudi, c'est la journée nationale du service 211 qui nous rappelle qu'on a tous accès à une ligne d'aide confidentielle et sans frais en composant le 211. Que vous ayez besoin d'un soutien en santé mentale ou de renseignements au sujet de services communautaires, n'hésitez pas à composer le numéro. Le service est offert 24 heures sur 24 dans 150 langues. Les agents à l'autre bout du fil vous aideront à trouver les bonnes ressources. Vous n'êtes pas seul. Alors, s'il vous plaît, demandez de l'aide et prenez soin de vous. Before I close, I'd like to take a moment to recognize a great public servant, Ian Shugart, the clerk of the Privy Council. Ian has been an extraordinary leader through this public health crisis. He's leading the public service in tremendous efforts and supports to get Canadians through this pandemic. And as he faces health challenges, I want him to know that we're all pulling for him. Merci beaucoup tout le monde.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Starting with the phone today. Opératrice, une question, une sous-question. C'est à vous.
Thank you. The first question, Althea Raj, HuffPost Canada. Your line is open.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Your government has responded to federal whistleblowers who broke the law by leaking information to the public about what was happening in places such as Rideau Hall and in some long-term care homes. I don't think most Canadians realize that the whistleblowing law actually prevents whistleblowers from speaking publicly, that if they talk to journalists to flag wrongdoing, they can be fired for doing that, and that that is legal. 4 years ago, your own government, your own MPs rather, told your government that the law needed fixing and that it should be expanded to encourage more workers to come forward and flag wrongdoing so that corrective steps could be taken. Although you promised to do something, nothing was done. Now that you've spent hundreds of billions of dollars and more than 20,000 Canadians have died, will you expand the whistleblowing law in order to protect and flag whistleblowers and to flag wrongdoing?
It's extremely important that every Canadian has a safe and secure workplace, free from harassment or other challenges and inappropriate behavior. That's why we've taken significant measures to strengthen processes and procedures in supporting anyone who comes forward with concerns. We also know that whistleblowers play an extremely important role in flagging how government can do better, and indeed the level of transparency and confidence a government can give Canadians in constantly improving, constantly doing better, and sharing what we need to do to improve is something that we've always been committed to. I look forward to continuing to work with all parties and members of the public service on strengthening measures to make sure that this government is always open about what's going wrong and how we can fix it.
Following up, Althea?
Yeah, I feel like you constantly say the right things, but your government's actions don't follow through on the words that you say. Why won't you fix the law if you acknowledge that it is too restrictive?
We're always looking to do better. We're always looking to improve structures and systems within the government. And I thank you very much for bringing forward these concerns. Like we have many MPs and Canadians bringing forward these concerns. We're going to continually look to improve structures to make sure that what we're doing for Canadians is being done right, is supporting Canadians throughout this pandemic and beyond. I made a simple promise at the beginning of this pandemic that we would have Canadians' backs. And through listening to MPs, to Canadians who come forward with gaps or challenges that they're facing, we've done a tremendous amount to improve the supports for Canadians right across the country, and we will always look to continue to do that.
Thank you. Opératrice, prochaine question au téléphone.
Merci. La prochaine question, Catherine Lévesque, La Presse canadienne. À vous la parole.
Oui, bonjour, M. Trudeau. Je voudrais revenir sur les frontières terrestres. Est-ce que le Canada va refuser l'entrée à un snowbird, par exemple, qui n'aurait pas son test en main?
Non. Ce n'est pas légal pour le Canada de refuser l'entrée à quelqu'un qui a le droit d'entrée, qui est un citoyen canadien. Quand ils se présentent à la frontière au Canada, ils sont déjà sur le territoire canadien. On ne peut pas les renvoyer aux États-Unis s'ils sont canadiens ou s'ils sont résidents permanents. On peut par contre, appliquer des pénalités sévères s'ils n'ont pas leur test. On peut exiger un suivi attentif de Santé Canada avec d'autres dépistages. Mais on sait que la grande majorité des gens vont faire ce qui est nécessaire et se procurer un test pour pouvoir le montrer à la frontière et pour pouvoir rentrer chez eux pour faire leur quarantaine de 2 semaines. It is not legal to refuse entry to any Canadian who wants to come home. And that's something that is the major difference between land borders and air borders. You can prevent someone from boarding a flight in Miami or elsewhere. You can't prevent someone who's standing at a land border crossing from entering Canada because technically they're already on Canadian soil when they're speaking to that customs officer. That's why what we can do is, in cases of no test to show, apply a stiff penalty, a fine, and demand and ensure a rapid and complete follow-up to make sure that they are getting tested, that they are being properly quarantined, that they are not putting at risk the safety of other Canadians by returning home without a clear negative test. These are measures we're putting forward, but as of next Monday, people who show up at a Canadian land border on non-essential travel will be expected, like returning snowbirds, will be expected to show a negative PCR test from the previous 72 hours.
En suivi, Catherine?
Oui, tout à fait. Pouvez-vous nous dire de quelles pénalités, quelles amendes on parle exactement et en fait, quelles seront les conséquences pour quelqu'un, un Canadien qui n'aurait pas son test négatif en main? Qu'est-ce qu'on va faire exactement? Merci.
D'abord, il faut comprendre que les travailleurs non essentiels par avion représentent à peu près 95% des voyageurs qui rentrent au Canada par avion, mais des travailleurs non essentiels au niveau de nos frontières terrestres représentent seulement à peu près 5% des gens qui traversent. La grande majorité des gens qui traversent à nos frontières terrestres, c'est des travailleurs essentiels, des chauffeurs de camions, des infirmières, des gens à ce niveau-là. Donc, pour cette petite proportion de gens qui arrivent à nos frontières terrestres, s'ils n'ont pas un test négatif, il va y avoir des amendes qui pourraient monter jusqu'à 3 000 $ par personne. Il va y avoir des mesures qu'on est en train de mettre sur pied qui vont assurer un suivi, un dépistage et un suivi pour s'assurer qu'ils ne sont pas en train de mettre à risque les autres Canadiens avec leur retour au pays.
Merci. Opératrice, dernière question au téléphone.
Thank you. Merci. Our last question, Hélène Bizetti, Le Devoir. Votre ligne est ouverte.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau. Juste pour bâtir là-dessus, donc vous dites que ça pourrait être des amendes allant jusqu'à 3 000 $ par personne. Et vous parlez aussi de suivi. Peut-on imaginer que ces voyageurs-là seraient eux aussi placés, par exemple, dans des hôtels surveillés? Et d'ailleurs, sur cette mesure-là, pour les voyageurs en avion, qu'est-ce qui tarde? Là? Pourquoi on n'a toujours pas de date d'entrée?
Déjà, dans des situations où les gens se présentent dans un aéroport à l'arrivée au Canada d'outre-mer et ils démontrent qu'ils n'ont pas un plan adéquat de quarantaine, on a déjà des endroits où ils vont devoir aller s'isoler s'ils ne peuvent pas faire adéquatement leur quarantaine à la maison. On a déjà des systèmes en place aux grands aéroports pour établir ces possibilités. On va évidemment travailler maintenant pour assurer ces mécanismes pour nos frontières terrestres. Évidemment, il y a plus de détails qu'on va annoncer sur les mesures qu'on va mettre en place, mais je voulais donner les gens un peu d'avertissement qu'à partir de lundi prochain, si vous rentrez au Canada par frontière terrestre, vous allez devoir démontrer un test négatif depuis 72 heures. Pour les autres mesures, y compris nos mesures aux aéroports, on va avoir des annonces à venir dans les jours à venir. On est en train de mettre en place toute la logistique pour s'assurer que les Canadiens soient bien protégés.
Ensuite, Hélène?
Et oui, j'aimerais juste revenir sur cette question de la PCU, là, le fait qu'il n'y aura pas besoin de rembourser. Il y a plein de gens qui avaient dit que dès le départ, eux, ils n'ont pas appliqué pour obtenir la PCU parce qu'ils avaient compris les règles correctement. Leur revenu net était inférieur là, à la limite exigée. Qu'est-ce que vous dites à ces personnes qui vont sentir un traitement inéquitable et est-ce que ces personnes-là pourraient, par exemple, rétroactivement faire une demande pour obtenir le même traitement? Merci.
Il ne va pas avoir de mesures rétroactives, mais on est là pour aider les gens qui ont fait une erreur à cause d'un manque de clarté des instructions. On ne va pas les obliger de rembourser et on a mis en place énormément de mesures pour aider bien des gens qui en avaient besoin, mais nos critères d'admissibilité ont été fixés au niveau où ils ont été pour des raisons.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Mike Blanchfield, Canadian Press. I want to ask about, get some thoughts on vaccine nationalism from you, that concept. The U.S. has invoked its Emergency Defense Act. Europe is reportedly putting some strict controls over the export of certain vaccine ingredients. This obviously has implications for Canada and our supply. I mean, how can these actions not have a negative impact on the flow of vaccines to Canada? What can you say to Canadians who might be wondering about this?
We worked very hard from the very beginning of this pandemic to secure a diverse portfolio of vaccines for Canadians because we knew there would be challenges. We saw challenges in the spring around PPE and the competition internationally for that, we would be well advised to ensure both a diversity of origins and sources and types of potential vaccines, as well as sufficient doses to ensure that we would be able to cover all Canadians in various different configurations, depending on which companies landed effective vaccines first. Obviously, we continue to work with partners around the world. We understand the pressure that every government is feeling to vaccine as many of their citizens as quickly as possible. We're certainly working every single day and night, to make sure we're getting as many doses for Canadians as possible, and we'll continue to. And indeed, we're going to see millions of doses arriving in the coming weeks and tens of millions in the coming months. At the same time, we all know that we don't get through this pandemic anywhere until we get through it everywhere. It is a global pandemic, and that's why Canada, while at the same time as we are procuring vaccines for Canadians in a priority way, we are also participating fully in initiatives like COVAX and other international initiatives to ensure that we are supporting the developing world who need access to vaccines as well.
Glenn McGregor, CTV News. Prime Minister, Toronto's top public health officer has said we're entering a new pandemic now because of the emergence in the province of variants from South Africa, Brazil, and the UK. And yet the Premier is moving ahead with economic reopening, starting even this week. Asking you not as a Prime Minister, but as a resident of Ontario who sends his kids to school here, are you comfortable with that decision to begin reopening now when we're still facing all these variants and potentially a third wave?
I think we're all worried about the arrival of new variants and the impact that that could have, even as we are working hard to get everyone vaccinated as quickly as possible. There are real questions about what the impacts these variants will have both on the spread of COVID-19 and on the impact of the vaccines. That's why while we work on vaccinating people as quickly as possible, we also need to add to that public health measures, which means restrictions in many cases, but also means things like contact tracing, means things like using the app and expanding it to use QR codes, moving forward on rapid testing very efficiently so that wherever we see outbreaks, we're able to isolate those and respond quickly. We're going to need to be extremely nimble as we move forward on a reality of new variants that's going to require all of us to continue working together, to continue working to get vaccines in as quickly as possible, but also making sure we're keeping up to date on the testing, the contact tracing, and everything each of us individually can do to keep ourselves and our loved ones safe.
Steve Chase with the Globe and Mail. I have a question about the reporting we did about this company, which is operates the visa application center for Canada in Beijing. It's actually owned by the Beijing Police, the Public Security Bureau. And now this Public Security Bureau, of course, has quite a reputation. It's been accused of torture by human rights critics. But more importantly, what will you do about this? Will you allow this to continue? And what would you tell Chinese nationals seeking to escape China about the safety of applying for a Canadian visa at a visa application center run by the Beijing Police?
First of all, we take the security of all applicants and the privacy of all applicants extremely seriously. And when we contracted out with a global company that does visa services around the world, we ensure that it is able to keep Canadians and applicants' data private and secure. Indeed, when they further subcontract to local offices and local companies, that is something that we continue to demand. But in the case of this particular local office, I can tell you that a number of other countries also use this local company, including Great Britain and New Zealand, who are both our Five Eyes companies, Five Eyes allies. We of course, take these reports extremely seriously, and I've asked the ministers involved to follow up and ensure that we can guarantee the safety and integrity of our visa systems for all applicants.
Hi, Prime Minister. Tom Perry, CBC. We've heard some reports out of Calgary about travelers being kept in quarantine hotels, not getting enough food, being denied medical access. I'm wondering what you think about that. Are you worried that these kind of reports feed into conspiracy theories about government internment camps, things like that? And also, how do you ensure Canadians, as you move to set up this 3-day quarantine, that they're not going to be essentially held in prison?
Yeah. I think it's extremely important to make a clear distinction that these aren't detentions. These are medically based isolations. On the 3-day quarantine, for example, that is the average time for a PCR test to be returned. It's the expected amount of time in which a returning traveler might have to stay in the approved local airport hotel. But indeed, if it only takes 24 hours to get that PCR test back and it comes back negative, they are going to be free to go home and continue their quarantine as mandated at home. We are not detaining people. These are public health measures that are necessary to ensure that we are keeping Canadians safe, particularly given the arrival of new variants in Canada and extensively around the world. We need to do everything we need to keep people safe. We need to do that in a way that is respecting people's dignity and supporting them properly. And I can assure you that everyone is following up carefully to make sure that the conditions in which people have to do their quarantine or their testing are always adequate.
En français, s'il vous plaît, M. Trudeau.
Je pense que c'est important de comprendre que les mesures qu'on mis par rapport, par exemple, aux 3 jours d'attente pour les résultats d'un test, sont pas là par punition, c'est pas une détention, c'est une mesure de santé pour les isoler pendant qu'on reçoit l'information de leur test. Ça prend normalement autour de 3 jours pour recevoir ce test, mais s'ils reçoivent leurs résultats après une journée ou 2, ils seront évidemment libres de rentrer chez eux pour continuer leur confinement de façon rigoureuse et suivie. Mais on n'est pas là pour détenir les gens, on est là pour assurer que les règles de santé publique soient suivies et que les gens soient gardés en sécurité. Par rapport au traitement, je peux vous assurer que Santé Canada, par l'Agence de santé publique du Canada, prend très au sérieux le besoin de respecter et de traiter avec dignité les gens qui sont dans ces endroits-là. Et nous allons toujours faire des suivis pour assurer que c'est bien le cas.
Oui, bonjour, Laurence Martin de Radio-Canada. Par rapport à la PCU, vous dites que vous allez donner donc une amnistie pour que les gens aient plus de temps là, pour rembourser l'impôt qu'ils doivent. En même temps, vous l'avez répété souvent, c'est une prestation d'urgence qui était pour les gens dans le besoin. Est-ce que plutôt que de retarder ce remboursement, on ne serait pas mieux de l'annuler comme c'est pour des gens qui étaient dans le besoin?
Bien, pour les gens qui sont les plus vulnérables, les plus dans le besoin, ils vont pas avoir énormément d'impôts à payer de toute façon. Mais la PCU n'était pas juste là pour les gens les plus vulnérables, les moins fortunés. Il y a énormément de gens qui ont accédé à la PCU qui vont avoir le moyen de payer des impôts dans les mois à venir, qui vont pouvoir faire leur part. Et nous, on a toujours un souci d'équité, de justesse pour tout le monde. Et si quelqu'un a la capacité de payer les impôts et est plus fortuné, mais a quand même utilisé la PCU, c'est tout à fait normal qu'il puisse payer de l'impôt là-dessus, comme les gens, par exemple, payent de l'impôt sur leur assurance emploi.
Can I ask you to repeat that in English, please?
Obviously, we put forward measures to help people who are in difficult situations, and the CERB is there was there to help people who were facing no revenue coming in because of the pandemic, and that was extremely important at that moment. But the CERB wasn't only taken up by low-income Canadians. Obviously, if you're extremely low income and you took the CERB, you're unlikely to be having to pay much in the way of taxes come tax time. But for many people who took the CERB because they needed it in the moment, but then went on to get back to their job, back to work, and are in the income range where they're used to paying their fair share of taxes, the CERB will be taxed. It's about making sure that it's fair for everyone. We tax revenue, we tax income related to employment insurance, for example. The CERB is there as a income replacement measure. Some people will not have to pay taxes on it if their income is low enough. Many others will need to pay their share of taxes. That's just how our system works. But we are giving an amnesty on people on the interest payments on repaying their CERB taxes, because we know that we're still going on in this pandemic, and it's a tough time for everyone, and we want to be able to support people as best we can.
Prime Minister Mike Couture with Global National. On the allegations facing General Jonathan Vance, the Office of Defence Minister Harjit Sajjan says it notified the Privy Council office of concerns about Vance's alleged behaviour. So first I wanted to know, is that enough? And Canadians want to know what you knew. Did Defence Minister Sajjan at any point raise concerns with you about General Vance's behaviour towards female subordinates? And I think Canadians just want to know what you knew.
First of all, Canadians know that everyone, whether they're in the armed forces or working for the Canadian government or in any workplace across the country, deserves to be in a safe workplace free from harassment or in unacceptable actions. That is something that we take very, very seriously as a government, which is why we've brought in strengthened processes over the past number of years and have absolutely no tolerance for these sorts of behaviors. We have brought in place procedures that need to be followed and needed to be followed in these cases. And we are very pleased that there is going to be a review going on to ensure that every step of the way the right processes were followed. That's something that will be looked at right now, but I can assure you that we've always taken these very seriously and ensured that those proper steps are followed.
Thank you, Prime Minister. C'est ce qui met fin à la conférence de presse d'aujourd'hui.
Merci tout le monde.